Hello again, and welcome back to the Wiccan Conservative. I've been gone for a couple days, just trying to digest all the news that's been going on out there, and got to take in the State of the Union address and digest that a little bit, and kind of let everybody else go forward with their videos to see what everybody else is talking about and what rang true to each individual out there. If you have your favorite part of the State of the Union address, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and dive right into what I thought was the most important part of the State of the Union and my feelings beyond what we consider to be important moving forward in the rest of the Trump presidency. First and foremost, I wanted to say that the number one thing that was addressed, and as I've seen it throughout my research for the past couple days and the people that I follow, socialism has hit really, really hard. The president denounced socialism in the State of the Union address. That was my favorite part. I thought to myself, that's exactly what we wanted our president to say. I know that a lot of people on the right have been kind of speaking out and trying to get him to say his thoughts on socialism, especially with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders being huge advocates for socialism. And the more media that I take in, the more it's becoming apparent that people think that a lot of socialism is already incorporated into our government already. So what's with a little bit more? I want to start us off with a quote from Thomas Jefferson to James Madison in a letter from 1787. And the quote is, "I own I am not a friend to a very energetic government. It is always oppressive." That quote is very, very true. When your government is energetic and wants to go out and make new laws and rules and regulations, you have to think about what type of liberties are being sacrificed to fulfill that agenda. Our founding fathers obviously felt that limited government was an integral part of our Constitution and was absolutely necessary for the continuance of our republic. So when you see people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez come out and try to shake up the government or introduce things that are overbearing for what a government was intended, that quote really speaks to me personally as it stands with what's happening in the government today. What I want to do for you folks is clear up some confusion on the definitions of words and how words are being used against us in society. The big trend now is to redefine words and make them mean what we want them to mean, as opposed to what they truly mean and what they were meant to embody. You see it in stupid things like they had the slut walk, and now slut is supposed to be an empowering word for females. There's people who go out and say, you know, there's a difference between socialism and democratic socialism. They made heart a transitive verb. There's just a huge war on our English language. And if somebody perceives the words to be negative, it seems like that's the type of words that they're picking to go out and change the meanings of. So today we're going to be pulling all of our definitions from definitions.net. There's a lot of different people who don't like the established dictionaries that are out there, and depending on what type of web search engine that you use will vary upon the results that you get. So for all intensive purposes, I went to definitions.net to get the definitions for these words, and they pull from a lot of different dictionaries and meanings and kind of collaborate everything all together. So the definitions that I will give you today will be a collaboration of all of the definitions that were found on the website. Let's roll right into what definitions.net describes as democratic socialism. Democratic socialism is a huge term used by the left now, and they try to tell you that it's different than regular socialism, and where a lot of people are getting confused is that word democratic. So if they put democratic in front of socialist, then you get a lot more people who feel more comfortable using the term. And I think that it's because of the word democratic prior to the word socialism. So the definition is read as it rejects centralized, elitist, or authoritarian methods of transitioning from capitalism to socialism in favor of grassroots level movements aimed at the immediate creation of decentralized democracy. In short, it is pretty much controlling the government, controlling the population through government taxes and regulations. The wording that's used in the actual definition of democratic socialism seems to be really appealing. You see the words grassroots movements, you see the words decentralized democracy, and for a lot of people who are constitutionalists and people that are, kind of all for local governments, all of those words are aimed to prick your ears, and they're to get your attention so that you start paying attention to what they want you to pay attention to, as opposed to what would really happen under democratic socialism. So when you look at the people that are saying that we already have democratic socialism happening in America and that we are partaking on this democratic socialism, I'm going to pick up a little piece that I heard on the Dan Bongino show a couple days ago, that the Obamacare was a great example of the government trying to implement democratic socialism. And when I sat back and I thought about it, that actually made a lot of sense. So you basically have a program that was meant to be for affordable health care for all. And when they put it into play, how did they kind of feed it to you? Well, they told you that it was going to help the people that couldn't afford insurance. They told you could keep your doctors. They told you that you could do all of these things. And when the time came down to it, a lot of people weren't able to keep or do the things that they were told that they were supposed to be able to do with this program going into place. And the very next thing that really jumps out at you after you get over the doctors and the coverage and the price point would be what happens if you still can't afford it. And that's where those taxes and regulations come in. Now, of course, they didn't tell you it was a tax. They told you it was a penalty at first. So if you didn't have the insurance or you refused to carry the insurance, you were penalized for it. And then they said, no, we can't call it a penalty, we have to call it a tax. Well, that's how all this got kind of rolled into the mess that it is now. I know a lot of people on the right are like, just abolish Obamacare and, be done with it. And, oh, well, too bad, so sad. But the whole point of Obamacare was to make people dependent on the government, and they succeeded. So now that you have all these people that are on this healthcare program, it's immoral. You can't take them off. Oh, goodness gracious, they don't have coverage. They don't have healthcare coverage. They aren't offered it. I remember stating to one of my friends, when Obamacare was rolling out, that, all these small businesses had to offer healthcare now to their full-time employees, and everybody was ranting and raving and saying, oh, well, that's such a great idea. I don't understand why they don't do that anyways, and yada, yada, yada. And immediately I remember seeing through it and saying to her, then what stops those businesses from cutting the hours of their quote unquote full-time employees, down to part-time hours, to the point where they would not have to offer them insurance? And how does that help the workforce? Now that they would be cutting their hours, and then they wouldn't be offered health care on top of it. And exactly what I feared would happen happened. And a lot of people were cutting their hours. And even if the company couldn't afford to cut your hours back to a real part-time schedule, they starved their people to right underneath a full-time status level. And as long as they didn't hit the full-time status level, they weren't required to offer them insurance. To me, that is a huge red flag as to the productivity of the nation, and a huge cut to the free market. Because before, when we were basing our privileges, so to speak, I know a lot of you don't agree with that, but bear with me, it is a privilege to have the insurance offered to you through your employer. It's definitely not something that I feel is a necessity for a private business to do. So let me clarify why I consider it a privilege. But when you had the opportunity to let the business decide who their full-time employees were based on merit, and then offer them benefits and perks to stay with their company, they got the best type of workers, and they paid for them, and they were able to pay them more because they weren't consistently paying employees who were not doing what they should be doing for the jobs. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came out, I believe it was yesterday, with her new green bill, New Deal and Green Bill, or I'm not exactly sure what the name of it was. I had it posted on my personal Facebook account word for word, and I did it that way simply because more people will read a long post rather than follow a link. So I took the time out and actually cut and pasted each part of her bill, and posted it for everybody to read. I encourage you to go out and read it. I don't agree with it personally because, again, we are talking about the government getting involved in the energy that powers our nation. So part of the bill had come out and said that I think she wanted it within the next 10 to 12 years to be completely devoid of fossil fuels. They wanted us to switch over to clean, renewable energy, and she had, I think it's 6 pages long, kind of going through what they were going to do to cut these carbon emissions, and how they were going to kind of implement this new green bill. She's not satisfied with the fact that we have cut our carbon emissions, that we have, kind of taken steps towards clean, renewable energy, but she doesn't understand that it's a technology that's still growing, and it's something that we haven't found a solution to. We don't have the answer or the technology as of yet to power our entire society on clean, renewable energy, I'm sure that most of us would feel comfortable transitioning to a system like that, if it didn't detrimentally affect the workers that are in the carbon emissions business, if that's what you want to call it. I know a coal miner up in, I believe he works in West Virginia, that would cut his job. My husband works on airplanes, so if there's no more planes, he's out of a job. The reach of her bill would absolutely affect somebody in some way. So if you get the chance to go look over her bill, it's a very democratic socialist bill, and it raises a lot of big red flags as to how the government would get involved in making sure that you converted to a democratic socialist country. If you go into the actual definition of socialism, again, definitions.net describes it as a state ownership of industry and capital philosophies that support social equality, collective decision making, distribution of income based on contribution, and public ownership of productive capital and natural resources. Again, these are some pretty appealing adjectives. We want to be collective in our decision making. We want public ownership of, productive capital and natural resources to an extent. It sounds really good for social equality and yada, 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 but at the end of the day, what you're dealing with is you're going to have to take from somebody else to give to somebody who doesn't have. Obviously, in the system that we live in today, it's a capitalist free market. If I come up with a good idea and I market that good idea and I go out and create a prototype for that idea, and I, put it on the market and I say, I'm going to charge whatever for it, minus my expenses for everything that I needed to pay for to get up until that point is profit for me. I came up with the idea, I marketed the idea, I patented the idea, I went out and I sold the idea, and it took off. And lots of other people decided that they really needed this product or really had this product, and it sells and it sells and it sells. And of course, since I started this product, I want to profit from this product. In a socialistic environment, I would have to give somebody who made my product the same amount that I got for coming up with the idea, marketing the idea, and doing it all pretty much myself before it blew up. Why should somebody feel entitled to that much of my hard-earned work? I do apologize for the background noise. Filming outside is always a little sketchy what you're going to get. So sorry about that. But going back into the public ownership of productive capital and natural resources, you would think then you would be able to kind of make an argument for socialism. Well, don't you want to be a part of the farming industry, for one? Don't you think you should go out and don't you want to have part of the farms, and that way, when the farmer takes home 10 potatoes and he gets these 10 potatoes and divvies them out to everybody else, everybody should have the equal amount. Well, at the end of the day, didn't the farmer plant those seeds? Didn't he take care of those crops? And didn't he, kind of do most of the work? And now these people are coming in and saying, oh, no, we'll just give it to other people too because they don't have it. That's really and truly the idea of socialism is, you have the few contributing members to society because they can contribute, and then you have people that either don't want to or cannot contribute to society being kind of supported by everybody else. In my eyes, that's what a collectivism is. When we go back into comparing and contrasting regular socialism to democratic socialism, that would mean no more private businesses. So you would take everything that you own and put it into a pot, and then the pot would be divvied up equally amongst everybody else. But we all know that somebody who goes and gives, for example, voice lessons to children who want to be singers, their product isn't as marketable or as valuable to somebody as the farmer's product is valuable. One feeds people, and one is just teaching somebody a hobby or a skill for them, to do in their spare time or whatever. I can't, think off the top of my head. I apologize again. So when you move into a democratic socialism, the word democracy really scares me. I do know that we try to be as democratic as possible when it comes down to our decision-making processes and things to that effect. But democracy to me means mob rule mentality. So if at any point the democracy claims that your product is not as valuable as somebody else's product, they can overrule you very easily and force you into their type of thinking just because there's more of them than there are of you. I don't think that that's a good basis for a society. I don't think that that's how our human nature is, and I believe that it leads to a state of communism, which I will give you the definition of next. Communism is a form of socialism that abolishes private ownership, promotes collectivism in a classless society, or a totalitarianism, which single authoritarian parties control state-owned means of production while professing an aim to establish a classless society. So with human nature being what it is, we tend to look out for ourselves before we look out for others. It's just self-preservation. It doesn't make us bad. It doesn't make us good. It just means that you cannot continue to produce if you're not here. So with the will to move on and the will to be a productive member of society being ingrained in your blood, when you give yourself up to a collective thinking and you start thinking about the betterment of others before the betterment of yourself, you're more or less giving over your personal rights, your personal liberties to somebody else, and you're letting them make decisions for you, i.e. the democracy, i.e. mob rule, i.e. democracy, socialism, communism. They're kind of all intertwined into one. Because at the end of the day, who divvies up what? Who sits there like a authoritarian figure and says, okay, well, I'm going to be the one to say, this is enough for you, that's enough for you, that's enough for you. Who's to say that that's enough for me? With the free market being what it is, I can go out and I can buy, 20 different pairs of shoes if I want 20 different pairs of shoes. Can I wear all those shoes at the same time? No. Could I even wear those shoes, once in the same day? No. This is the type of mentality that the socialists have. Well, you have an excess of shoes, so go give your shoes to people who don't have shoes. Well, I bought those shoes, and I bought them because I like them, and just because I'm not wearing them today doesn't mean that I don't want to wear them tomorrow. Why should I have to take what I worked hard for and give to somebody else because they don't have it, simply for the fact that they don't have it? What if they don't even want it? There's lots of things out there. I know I'm probably going to get hammered for this, but I'll say that I don't go to the doctors very often. I have a love-hate relationship with our healthcare system. And just, going back into Obamacare, when they told me that, I had to buy insurance for myself. I carry it for my kids. I make my kids go to their checkups. They are required by law to have certain immunizations and certain doctor's appointments fulfilled for school. I have to keep them, healthy and up to date on their shots and things to abide by the law to send them to school. But for myself in general, I don't go to the doctors all the time. I don't desire to go to the doctors all the time. I'm a pretty healthy person, and I don't want to be forced to buy something that I don't want. And I don't want to be forced to buy something because somebody else wants it. But in a socialistic, communistic, democratic socialist type of environment, that's exactly what they want. Whether you use the product or you don't use the product, you need the product or you don't need the product, you want the product or you don't want the product, you will be required to participate. That's exactly what Obamacare did. I know plenty of people who were like, "Well, I'll just pay the fine. I'll pay the penalty. It's still cheaper than to get the insurance." Then what was the point? That's the thing that I don't get. So they're telling you, well, this is good for you. You have to get it. And the reason you have to get it is because it's good for you. Well, if I still opt out, then that should be my own personal choice. It only affects me at the end of the day. Unless I go, abuse the system where I'm utilizing an emergency room and not paying my bills, it doesn't negatively affect anybody else in the healthcare system. The way that our insurance is set up, you would think that with the more people on insurance, the cheaper it would be because the pot would be bigger to pull from. So whenever anything would happen, you've got this money kind of put off to the side, and that's what you're using. Well, no, everybody that's went to file a claim knows that you only get covered up to X amount of dollars, and then you have to pay the rest. So even our insurance doesn't work the way that it should necessarily work. And I think that makes for another good point as to why socialism leads to communism, and any type of state ownership of industry or capital is going to lead to a totalitarianism. It's going to lead to all the power in one place, and as we know, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So these different societies that have already implemented quote-unquote socialistic governments, that's how they roll over so quickly into a dictatorship or a communism type of government. I thought it was kind of funny that according to CIA.gov, as of today, the CIA does not recognize any socialist regimes as an actual form of government. They're all different types of governments. If you go to CIA.gov, I apologize again for the noise, CIA.gov, and you will be able to look up every a government in each country and do your homework, and even if they promote socialism in their constitutional documents or the things that rule their country, depending on what they call their charters, none of them actually are identified as socialistic countries. I think that's really important to get out there, because if you go on to your favorite search engine and you do a search for socialistic countries, you will get all different kinds of feedback from it. I, happen to go on to, there's no real, because the CIA doesn't acknowledge any socialistic governments. There's not really any like .orgs or .edus that I found. If you find them, please put them in the comments below so that I can check them out. But if you go to top10y.com, their top socialistic countries are Sri Lanka, Portugal, North Korea, India, Guyana, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Laos, Cuba, and China. That's their top 10. And if you go on to worldatlas.com, World Atlas considers Vietnam, China, Cuba, and Laos to be Marx-Leninist socialists. So the more you go down this bunny trail and the more that you're listening to people talk, understand that it's a word battle. It's a war on words. They're trying to get you to jump on the new definitions that they came up with for the words. And then they classify it. Well, it's, Venezuela's not a socialist country. It's it was a this country. Or, Cuba and Laos, they're Marx-Leninist socialist. And they're getting into the nitpicky things because what they're telling you is not true. And they want you to believe their definition, not the true definition and not what really is going to be happening. I was in a conversation online last night, and there was a guy who really disliked my quote of socialism leading to communism and absolute power corrupting absolutely. And he said something along the lines of, how does socialism lead to communism? So I, decided that I wouldn't give him my personal experiment as to why I felt that socialism led to communism. I went to marxistmail.org, Marxist as in like Marx, Lenin and Marx, marxistmail.org. It's called Introduction to Socialism. And it literally states that socialism is a precursor to communism. So it goes from capitalism, and then everybody thinks, okay, well, capitalism sucks. We're going to go to socialism. So then you try to implement more socialistic rules and laws and regulations, and eventually, unfortunately, it leads to communism. And it says so right there in their words. Obviously, they're advocating for socialism on that website, but they're not hiding it. It's not something that they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. That's the American left. They're pulling the wool over your eyes. They're redefining the terms to mean what they want it to mean. And the only reason that they're doing that is to get you on board. So whenever you listen to their words and you say, well, that doesn't sound like a bad idea, everybody should get equal amounts and equal this. Pay attention to what they're really saying to you, because the words don't change, the meanings don't change, and history has shown us that these types of governments don't hold up. This is communism becomes the revolt, and then after the revolt, you have a situation like they have in Venezuela. Everybody knows about the yellow vests in Europe. They're revolting against the will of their government because the people have been silenced. We've been talking, about the divide and what's going on here in the United States. So it's worth looking into. It's worth doing your homework about, and it's worth going and finding out why they're trying to switch up these terms and kind of cloud your judgment with their meanings. And I don't want to make this video too long. So I'm going to give you my last quote from Thomas Jefferson's first inaugural address in 1801. He said that a wise and frugal government, which shall leave men free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned, this is the sum of good government. I believe that that is a very powerful quote as well. It still holds true to this day. When we stop the free market from being free, that's when you are a slave to your government, and that's when you have kind of more people to answer to. I don't want to be a 21st century slave, and you shouldn't want to be a 21st century slave either. Don't let your government enslave you. Understand what these people are trying to put into law. Understand what their terms mean, and don't let them define things that you already know the answers to. That's all I wanted to talk about today. I went ahead and I did make myself a new Facebook page. They wouldn't let me use the Wiccan Conservative on my Facebook page, so you can look me up at Georgia Liberty, GeorgiaLiberty, Georgia Liberty. It sounded like a real name, so they let me put it into Facebook. If you like what you hear, look forward to more videos. I look forward to, speaking my mind. And if anybody has any questions or comments or anything, put them in the comments section below, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Bye.